Welcome to the deep dive. We are so glad you are joining us today for the Fluent Student.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening.
You know, we were thinking recently about how often we all turn on the news or open up a news app on our phones,
Right.
or even sit down to watch a complex historical documentary in English, and suddenly it feels like you were just drowning in military jargon.
It totally does. It can be
Yeah.
incredibly overwhelming for anyone.
Exactly. You might just be trying to stay informed about what is happening in the world, but the language used to describe global events can sometimes act like this dense, impenetrable barrier.
It really is a barrier. And for an English learner, it is a significant one. Because when you are reading about geopolitics, the terminology isn't just dramatic window dressing.
No, it has real meaning.
Yes, highly precise meaning. The specific words signal the severity and the scale of a situation.
And that is our exact mission for this deep dive today. We are going to teach you 20 essential war and military vocabulary words.
I am really excited about this one.
Me too. Our goal is to unpack these essential terms so that you, our listener, can navigate global events, history books, and the daily news cycle with absolute clarity and confidence.
Because precise language really does matter in conflict. Using the right word entirely changes our understanding of a situation.
It dictates how you perceive the danger or the diplomatic response. If we don't understand the nuance behind these terms, we just miss what is actually happening.
It's true.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should probably start by looking at the absolute macro level.
The big picture.
Exactly, the massive overarching concepts. The first word we need to introduce is war.
A war is a long period of fighting between countries or groups. So, using very simple English, a clear example would be everyone hopes that the war will end soon.
That is a great example, but there is another word we hear all the time that is similar, and that is conflict.
Right. A conflict is a strong disagreement or a fight between two sides. For example, you might read in the news, the border conflict has lasted for many years.
So people use these interchangeably in casual conversation all the time, but they are different, aren't they?
They are very different. A war is a type of conflict that involves sustained armed fighting. But a conflict is a much broader term.
It is like an umbrella term.
Precisely. A conflict could just mean a severe political disagreement before any weapons are even drawn.
So it is safe to say that all wars are conflicts, but not all conflicts are wars.
Yes, when you hear that two nations have a conflict, it means there is deep friction, but it hasn't necessarily escalated to the devastation of a war.
That makes the timeline of these events so crucial to understand. And speaking of timelines, that brings up two other massive terms that often get blurred together. The first one is invasion.
An invasion is when an army enters another country by force to take control. A good example sentence is, the invasion began early in the morning.
It implies a lot of sudden action, but then we have the word occupation.
Yes, an occupation is when an army enters and stays in a place to control it. For instance, you could say the military occupation changed the life of the city.
To me, the difference here feels like the difference between kicking the door down and actually buying the house.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. The chronological relationship is key. An invasion is the aggressive action of entering.
The violent event.
Right. While the occupation is the long-term state of staying and controlling that area.
Because once the initial fighting of the invasion cools down, the occupying force suddenly has to administer the area. They are setting up curfews and enforcing a new reality.
Exactly. And historically, armies can be great at invasions, but fail terribly at occupations because it is a completely different challenge.
Now that we understand the big picture of borders and countries, let's zoom in a bit.
Down to the field.
Yes, to the actual fighting. I love how specific English gets here. Let's look at the difference in size. Our next word is battle.
A battle is a specific fight between two armies during a war. For example, the soldiers fought a difficult battle on the hill.
But sometimes the fight is much smaller, so we use the word skirmish.
A skirmish is a small, short fight between small groups of soldiers. A great example sentence is, it wasn't a full battle, just a small skirmish.
The word skirmish is such a great vocabulary word to know.
It really elevates your English. A war is made up of big battles, and those battles might have tiny, brief skirmishes happening all around their edges.
A skirmish is more of a sudden flare-up,
Yes, exactly. It doesn't usually decide the outcome of the war.
which highlights how chaotic these environments are. And if you are reading about battles, you inevitably come across our next term, frontline.
A front line is the area where the fighting is actually happening. You might read something like, Food and water are hard to find on the front line.
It is the absolute edge of the danger zone. But how do armies know where that line is? That brings us to reconnaissance.
Reconnaissance is checking an area to get information about the enemy. For example, the plane was sent for reconnaissance to see where the tanks were.
That is a very tough word to spell and pronounce, isn't it?
It is notoriously difficult. Reconnaissance.
But the connection between those two words is fascinating. Reconnaissance is the information gathering phase.
Precisely. It dictates exactly where that dangerous front line is going to be drawn. You don't want to move troops to the front line without good reconnaissance.
Understanding that intelligence naturally leads us to how armies choose to attack. We have two very different tactical words here. First is siege.
A siege is when an army surrounds a city to stop food and supplies from entering. An example is the siege of the city lasted for 3 months.
That sounds incredibly slow and painful. But our next word is the exact opposite, ambush.
An ambush is a surprise attack by people waiting in a hidden place. For instance, the troops walked into an ambush in the forest.
Strategically, these seem like complete opposites in terms of pacing.
They absolutely are. A siege is agonizingly slow. You're relying on starvation and deprivation to win over months or even years.
And it inflicts a massive toll on the civilians inside.
It does. But an ambush relies entirely on sudden shock and surprise. It is over in minutes. One is slow, and the other is a sudden trap.
It is a dark picture, but vital for understanding history. And behind all these tactics, there are human beings. Let's look at the human element. The most basic term we have here is troops, or soldiers.
Troops or soldiers are groups of people who are trained to fight. Very simply, the government sent more troops to protect the border.
But battles are exhausting, so eventually you need our next word, reinforcements.
Reinforcements are extra soldiers or weapons sent to help an army. You would use it like this: the general asked for reinforcements because the enemy was strong.
Reinforcements represent a huge tipping point.
They really do. When troops are exhausted or outnumbered, reinforcements are the lifeline that can totally save them.
And that ties into who is actually helping you. That brings us to our next concept, allies.
Allies are countries or groups that join together to help each other. For example, the two countries were allies during the Great War.
But on the other side of the battlefield, we have the enemy or the opponent.
The enemy or opponent is simply the side that you are fighting against. You could say the enemy moved closer during the night.
Understanding your allies is the key to global politics. It explains why a small dispute suddenly turns into a huge world war.
Yes, because of the complex networks of allies stepping in to provide reinforcements.
Which brings us to a very heavy word you hear constantly on the news, casualties.
Casualties are people who are killed or hurt in a war. The example sentence is, there were many casualties on both sides after the fight.
This word causes so much confusion for English learners.
What's fascinating here is that even native English speakers get this wrong all the time. When people read the word casualties in the news, they often assume it only means fatalities.
They assume it means people who died.
Exactly. But it specifically means people killed or hurt. Anyone who was removed from the fighting force.
So a wounded soldier who survives is still counted as a casualty.
Yes. And a high number of wounded soldiers actually puts a massive strain on an army's medical resources. So casualties is a very broad, very important word.
I'm so glad we clarified that. Now, shifting focus from the people to the actual tools they use. Our next word is weapons or arms.
Weapons or arms are tools used for fighting, like guns, tanks, or bombs. For example, soldiers must learn how to use their weapons safely.
But it's not just the tools themselves, it is how they are used. That gives us the word bombardment.
A bombardment is a continuous attack with bombs or big guns. You might read, the city suffered a heavy bombardment all night.
The key word there is continuous.
It is. A bombardment isn't just one quick attack. It is relentless. We have to think about the sheer psychological and physical toll of continuous weapon use on an area.
It is designed to break the opponent's will to keep fighting.
Exactly. It creates a state of total exhaustion.
Now, sometimes an army is too small to fight against a huge bombardment, so they use a different style of fighting. Our next word is guerrilla.
Guerrilla refers to small groups of fighters who use surprise attacks to fight a larger army. A good sentence is, guerrilla warfare is very difficult to stop because the fighters hide easily.
A quick note on pronunciation for our listeners. It sounds exactly like the animal, gorilla.
Yes, exactly the same pronunciation, but totally different spelling and meaning.
If we connect this to the words we learned earlier, guerrilla fighters are vastly outnumbered.
Right, they lack the heavy weapons. So they would rely heavily on an ambush or a skirmish.
They would never fight a traditional battle on a clear front line.
Never. That would be tactical suicide.
Yeah.
They use the local terrain to hide, strike quickly, and vanish.
The ultimate cat and mouse game. Now, every conflict eventually has to reach an endpoint. That brings us to our final two terms. First is surrender.
To surrender is to stop fighting and admit that you have lost. For example, after many days of fighting, the army decided to surrender.
But sometimes they don't give up entirely. Sometimes they choose our last word, retreat.
To retreat is to move away from the enemy, usually because you are losing. You could say the troops had to retreat to a safer place.
The difference between those two is massive.
It really is. Retreating is a tactical movement. You are moving away to survive and potentially fight another day.
You keep your weapons and your troops, you are just falling back.
Yes. But surrendering is formally admitting total defeat. You put down your weapons and hand over control.
A retreat means the war continues, but a surrender means it is over.
Perfectly said.
Well, what does all of this mean for you, our listener? We have covered so much ground today.
We really have 20 essential words.
We moved from the massive scale of wars and occupations down into the tactical reality of ambushes and reconnaissance. We talked about frontline troops, the true meaning of casualties, and the finality of a surrender.
And the most important takeaway is that you are now armed with the vocabulary to truly grasp the nuances of global events.
You don't have to feel overwhelmed anymore.
Exactly. The next time you read the news or study history, these words won't be a barrier. They are the keys to unlocking complex stories.
You can navigate the English news cycle with complete confidence.
And before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. The definitions we discussed today, words like frontline, bombardment, and siege, they are very physical concepts.
They involve physical borders and real weapons.
Right. But as technology evolves, how might these definitions change?
Oh, that is an interesting thought.
What does a siege look like in a digital or cyber war? What is a front line when the conflict is happening on computer networks instead of a physical battlefield?
Or a bombardment of malicious code.
Exactly. It is fascinating to think about how this vocabulary will adapt in the future.
That is such a provocative thought to end on. Thank you so much for exploring these critical concepts with us today. Keep asking those big questions, keep practicing your English, and most importantly, keep your curiosity alive. We will catch you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.